On your way out, I also have a QR code if you want to watch the movie at home or share that with someone. They're screening the movie through the 22nd virtually, so you're able to watch that at home. So share that with other people. As I said, we're also having the panel live streamed on the ACLU's Facebook and YouTube, and you can watch that after the fact as well. So I want to set a little context now as we start to talk about what second chances in Maryland can look like. We saw in the film the story of the work to pass second legislation in DC. So it showed how the Incarceration Reduction Amendment Act, IRA, allowed incarcerated residents who committed serious crimes before their 18th birthday to petition the court for resentencing after they'd served at least 15 years. And similarly, we then saw how the Second Bulk Amendment Act in 2019 is an expansion of that. And that act was voted yes unanimously by DC's City Council on December 15th, 2020, which again allows a person up to now 25 who has served up to 15 years to apply to have their sentence reviewed. So here today, we're here to talk about what would that look like in Maryland through the Maryland Second Look Act. And so what we are doing as a coalition called the Maryland Second Look Coalition is working to get the Second Look Act sponsored, passed. It's sponsored by Senator Jill Carter and Delegate Cheryl Pastor. And it would create an opportunity for all people in Maryland who are incarcerated and have served at least 20 years to go before a judge and seek a lower sentence. The Second Look Act doesn't guarantee that anyone will receive a lower sentence. It simply allows a court to consider whether an individual should receive a reduction based on several factors, including what they have accomplished in those 20 years of incarceration. And it builds upon the Juvenile Restoration Act, which granted that opportunity for review for people who were sentenced under or incarcerated under 18. I'm going to introduce our panelists. If you went at the sign-in table, there's a full list of their bios. I'm going to read a little bit about each of them. Here, starting with William, who is next to me. So William Mitchell is a peer recovery specialist, a church leader, and a recipient of a second chance. He speaks at recovery events, works with All Path Recovery and AA and NA, and is a steadfast believer in God. He started and led a non-denominational church in prison for years to train and support other men on the inside. And so what he'll talk about today is coming home after almost 20 years in prison, and how he's still working to release other guys who are behind. And so then we have Miss Gwendolyn, who, let me find your bios. So Miss Gwen was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. Hello, Senator. Thank you for coming. And for the past 2 decades, she's advocated for criminal justice reform, focusing on incarcerated women and the elderly. She's the oldest of 13 children. As a mother of 6, she led a double life that led to her incarceration for 16 years in prison. She was sent home in 2020 to home confinement under the CARES Act, and in 2021 was granted compassionate release under the First Step Act. Thank you, Ms. Gwen. Now we have Desmond Hanif Perry, who's the co-founder and executive director of peer programs at Rectify, a forensic peer specialist for the Maryland Office of the Public Defender, former peer criminal justice coordinator at Helping Others Through Empowerment, and served as a certified peer recovery specialist navigator at 3C Recovery Support Training Institute. Similarly, after entering prison at the age of 19, he served a total of 20 years on a life sentence before being released in May of 2022. And it was also his birthday today, so happy birthday. And then we have one of our bill sponsors, Ms. Delegate Cheryl Pastor. So District 11A delegate for Baltimore County and the House sponsor for the Maryland Second Look Act. As an educator in public schools for years and former member of the Baltimore County School Board, Delegate Pastor has been moved to believe in second chances, in part after seeing a student of hers incarcerated with an extreme sentence. As a previous member of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future funding formula work group. She's dedicated to creating successful pathways for youth. Thank you for being here, delegate. We have Mr. Alonzo Turner Bay is a dedicated advocate in reentry work as a peer support specialist. He also volunteers with Fully Restoring Every Son's Hope, giving back to the community. He also dreams of starting a cleaning company and hopes to find a mentor to help him reach that goal. At 17 years old, he was incarcerated and sentenced as an adult to life plus 5 years. By the fourth time he was going up for parole, the state's attorney in Alonzo County, as a brave boy, had a conviction and sentence integrity unit where they reviewed cases with long sentences. And upon reviewing his growth, both the state's attorney and judge sent letters to the governor and parole board supporting his release. In October 16th, 2020, after 31 years, 6 months, 15 days, and 5 hours, Alonzo came home. And finally, we have Senator Jill Carter, who is our Senate sponsor for the Maryland Second Look Act. She's the District 41 Senator from Baltimore City, and having serving in the legislature for 20 years, she's been a driving force advocating for legislation that impacts the lives of incarcerated people and their families, including the Juvenile Restoration Act and removal of the governor from the parole process for lifers. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, we have, 3 mics, or maybe 4 mics now, so I might have to share. But let's get into some of our panel questions, and at the end, hopefully we have some time for some Q&A. Let me do a time check here, yeah. So, our first question is for each of you, why are second chances so important to you? And in that answer, if you could touch on what hope looks like for you or how you practice it yourself during your incarceration. For our bill sponsors, why is supporting the Maryland Second Look Act an important part of creating these second chances?
Thank y'all. Hello. Thank y'all for coming up and our support this forum. Before I go any further, I would be remiss if I did not give honor to Crystal Carr. It's because of her work. That we have the JRA in Maryland. I wrote Delegate Kirk Burns, and I copied the IRPC because of her. Even though the Second Look Act, the first one didn't pass, it ended up becoming JRA. A lot of us are here. So when we talk about second look, I always remind people of this, regardless of what you believe in. In the Bible, in Acts 9, talk about the story of Saul, who later became Paul, who was on his road to Damascus. At his time, when he was here today, he'd be labeled as a serial killer and a mass murderer, and his sentence would be death. But God saw fit while he was on his road to Damascus to change some things. Knocked him off his horse, and for a long extended period of time, no one heard from him. When he reappeared, he was no longer Saul, he was Paul. Why? Because God seemed fit to change his heart, his mind, and his condition. He gave him a second chance. He is spoken of, the only person who is second to him in the Bible is Jesus. Jesus is the only person who's spoken of more in the Bible than Paul. If God sees fit to give out a second chance to a mass murderer, why are we willing to give our children? Why are we willing to give our youth? Why are we willing to give the citizens in the state of Maryland a second chance? God forgives why we can't forgive and let a person who has changed their life, who has rehabilitated themselves, who have shown worthy of a second chance, why can't we? This is something that's way long overdue. Maryland is behind Mississippi when we talk about locking people up who look like us, giving up the life sentence. Mississippi, Maryland shouldn't even be mentioned in the same voice. So man, we gotta take some action. We gotta do some things to move this bill forward. I worked in a hospital while I was in prison. I would see men who have done 50 years in prison. They caught diabetes stuff they had, both their legs amputated. And when they died, the prison shackled them and handcuffed them to the bed until they went to the morgue and began the autopsy process. Even in death, in the state of Maryland, you are still in prison.
I also would like to second the brother Turner Bay honor and appreciation for Crystal Carpenter, also beneficiary of her work in Prince George's County when I was an individual who petitioned the Sentencing and Conviction Integrity Unit. She was an intricate part in me being released as well. When I think about second chances, I think about the humanity of the individual. I think about the humanity of a person and saying that when we give a second chance to a person, we're communicating to that individual that your humanity is valuable, that you, the person, are just like each and every one of us. You are liable to forget. You are subject to make mistakes. And for surety, the brother went from a biblical perspective, so I can say this, we sin. So this is something that I like to communicate to individuals, is that when we're talking about second chances, first thing is we have to factor in we're dealing with human beings. As a public defender right now, I have this ability to be able to go in front of the court, and often when I'm talking to the judges about individuals who may have relapsed because of their addiction, they violated their conditions of probation, and they may have caught another crime in the process, the first thing I do is I try to go directly to the human aspect of the person, and then talking about the disease, and then we can talk about the crime that was committed or the wrongdoing. Because at the end of the day, it's a person. It's a person we're talking about here. And, so that's the first thing I like to talk about when I'm talking about second chances is I think about it from a human perspective. And then secondly, I consider it to be something that me standing here right now as an example, as a living example of what it looks like, that I can be a voice for those individuals who haven't gotten it yet to say that it should be given. I was someone who was found guilty and charged of first-degree murder. Just like those young men we saw on the documentary tonight, I met two of them, extraordinary men, Shaka being one of them at Georgetown University, and me and him connected immediately because of the type of lives that we had that was similar. But I'm here as that example. And I've seen so many men who are still incarcerated that, a person asked me recently, recently they asked me, what about the individuals who are still, that may be gang members that's inside? And I had to help them to understand that a lot of those individuals, those young men who are still involved in gang activity in prison, really don't even want to be a part of that. They don't even want to be a part of that, but because of the abnormal circumstances that they're under and where they're at, many of them said, man, I just can't get out. I want to get out. I want to leave. I don't want to be a part of this. And so then you even have there that we have an example of a young man who's home right now in Prince George's County who was a gang member. And he's doing great because he finally said, I'm free. I'm free from that. I don't have to be around that pressure anymore. I'm free. But if you look at his institutional record and you look at the record of what he had been incarcerated for, a person would say, man, he don't deserve no chance at all. He's still currently actively considered to be a gang member in prison. But he said, man, I'm stuck. I'm not only locked up, but I'm locked into something that I don't even want to be a part of. I want to get out. So there's definitely individuals who, I just think that, sometimes we just don't look at the humanity, we don't look at the human aspect. And for many of us, like was pointed out in the documentary, that sometimes that second chance is our first chance. We were never even given a second chance from the beginning. Excuse me, given the first chance from the beginning. Because of the environments that we grew up in, the trauma that we've experienced, and what we had to endure before we even went to prison. So yeah, when I think about second chances, I really think about the humanity. Thank you.
Second chances. In 2004, I was sentenced to 400 months for selling drugs. At the time, I saw my mother sit there and that's exactly what I saw my mother do. When I got ready to walk out and they handcuffed me back out, and I got ready to walk out, I saw my mother walk over to the prosecutor. And this is what she said. I later found out from my sister. We're an old family. My grandmother was 106 when she passed away. I'm gonna be here when she comes home. She's coming home. My sister told me that night when I called home. That's what my mother had said. That was the beginning of the change. That was the beginning of my transformation. I knew that I had to be prepared to go home. In order to prepare myself to go home, I knew I had to do what some of these other guys and people in our audience have done. I knew I had to change. I had to transform who I was. I knew I had to take responsibility for what I had done and do all I could to make sure that neither I nor any of the people that I came in contact with could have that same mindset. So while inside I began to do, I saw that there was a need for elderly, the conditions, the issues that were not being dealt with. And I started working with the elderly, started working with people who were in hospice, people who, I became a, my mind's gone, someone sitting outside the suicide watch.
Observation aid.
Observation aid. I became an observation aid. That led me to be able to talk to people. We all, but inside I knew that that's where the change had to start. And many of us, many of the people that I left behind, their change started. Like I said, I got sentenced in 2006. I did 16 years. A whole bunch of bills came, a whole bunch of bills got passed. I got denied. I wasn't, didn't fit the criteria. I even had gotten lung cancer and got sent to a federal institution, for a medical institution, where I was supposed to be given compassionate release because I was terminal. Well, after serious prayer among me and my family, I was determined not to be terminal but cancer-free. But guess what? I was denied that compassionate release, so I didn't go home in 2016. It was 2019. I got a second chance again. That was when the First Step Act passed. It reduced my sentence from 400 months to 292 months. Again, I petitioned and got denied. 2020, the CARES Act, that act that gave people that $400 or $1,400, that stimulus money and all that other stuff. Well, it gave some of us in the federal system an opportunity to come home. Because of my institutional record and all the things I fit the criteria, I was allowed to come home June 2nd, 2020, one day before my 75th birthday. So you talk about second chances. I know what second chances, but I also know the preparation you have to do to prepare yourself to get to those second chances. So we're not advocating for people to just go and get a free out of jail card. That's not what we're talking about.
That's right. That's right.
You know, we're not talking about, we're advocating for people who have recognized their wrongdoing, did everything they could to make amends for it, and are now trying to come out and be a part of society that can make the changes in these young people that we are now going back to. Remember what they said about that predator, super predator, about our young kids back in the day? Well, guess what? Look at what's happening in Baltimore right now. We're already almost calling our kids that again. We're saying that they're not redeemable. We're saying that things are going too far. We need to change some of the good laws that we've made. We need to rescind some of those laws. So pay attention, please, not just second chances. Don't let them take back the opportunities that have been given already to some of those people like me who have been given that second chance. Don't let them change those laws. But make sure that this second chance bill that we have in Maryland, it gives people like me, people like some of you all sitting out there, some of your family members, gives them the opportunity to say, hey, we have changed and we can come out and we can help Baltimore become the Baltimore that we know it's supposed to be.
Thank you. My name is William Mitchell. So I served 18 years, 3 months, and 7 days. I was sentenced to 70 years for, okay. I was sentenced to 70 years for an attempted murder. The attempted murder was considered an attempt because somebody got shot in their forearm and in their leg. It was a non-life-threatening injury. Nevertheless, it was severe. So I was sent to prison. When I went to prison, many people in my life had always said, you're missing the mark. You've got more in you and you just want to play games. But there was a man in prison, I'll never forget him. He spoke of something other than, hey, you're special, because a lot of people in prison will come up to you and say, you're special. But this guy spoke of purpose. And I had never heard somebody speak to me about purpose, of you have a calling. And what I came to realize from listening to this man was that everybody on this planet has a calling. And if you don't fulfill your calling, then God has to create another person to fulfill your calling and their own calling. And it puts double duty on somebody else. As this man mentored me and encouraged me, it gave me that hope to realize that I do have a purpose and what I'm doing is not right. Through the years in prison, I went through many programs, but the programming wasn't always what got me. It was the men like Turner. There's a guy that was a Moore Science brother who would always pull me up and pose these analytical questions. And it would make me think way bigger than any horizon I thought of. And when I got the answer and I go back to him, he would say, now keep digging. I'm like, man, I just gave you the answer. But what it did was it made me realize that everybody in this room has one thing in common for sure. You've made a mistake. Some more severe than others, but we have all had a point in our lives where we said, oh man, forgive me. Everybody in this room has that commonality. And as the brother was talking about, looking at somebody as a human, I sat in prison and filed 14 briefs. And it wasn't until the 15th one that I finally got some rhythm, as they say in the jail. Rhythm means you finally got some movement on your case. And what it was an illegal sentence that I had from day one was sitting there on my shoulders the whole entire time, and nobody had found it. There was this place called Project 6 with Justin Brown and them, and they took my case for free, and they found this issue. And what it did was it changed my sentence. I went back, they said, yes, your sentence is illegal. They had to correct it. Once they unraveled my sentence, because I had 70 years and a whole lot of counts in there. So once they unraveled that sentencing package, they had to give me a whole new sentence. And though it only reduced my time it was first 70 for my first illegal sentence. I had a legal sentence in 2009. So my sentence went from 70 to 65. This time it went from 65 to 60. But what it did was I had a judge who was not obtuse. He had a broad horizon in his way of thinking. He thought large. And what he saw was the man who I had become. And I had a stack of certificates and letters an inch thick. And I'd ask my attorney, please don't just e-file it, give him a tangible copy. Because when I set this in your lap and say, here I am, here's the proof in the pudding that somebody does change, it is much more impactful than trying to scroll through a screen. And the man, after going through the process of a legal sentence, in effect of what this bill would do, it would give the judge the authority to look at a sentence after 20 years and say, okay, he's changed or he's not. I got that relief. And if it wouldn't have been for that legal sentence, I would still be sitting in prison. My first parole hearing would have been in 2032. My expected release, I would have been 72 years old. Today, I come home and I drive so hard for this cause. Because as a pastor in prison, I didn't care what your faith was. I loved you. They used to call me what did you use? The sheepdog. The sheepdog, because I would be biting on everybody's ankles. Because everybody's got a call. And somebody's got to be able to stand up and say, hey man, you got a call, and I'm not going to stop until you get there. As I texted the man last night, I said, bro, I'm going to get this bill passed. I promise you. Because somebody's got to fight. Because we all have that one thing in common. We all have made a mistake. Hope to me is getting everybody a fair shot. Everybody a fair shot. And when it comes to the victims, in my case, I was able to reach out to the victim, make amends, and help them get into recovery. Help them change their lives. Not all of us are these crazy killers. Some of us were just young, dumb kids on drugs who made a terrible mistake and are trying to repay society and the victims by doing the right thing. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. Judge
The judge in my case was Paul Eshak, and FYI, he is, and when I say an incredible human being, because the state really tried to say, Mr. Mitchell is just evading his punishment. 18 years of evading punishment, and the judge said, they also said that he has filed every brief under the sun, and the judge came back with saying this, and I quote, it might be a little off, but he said, I do not agree with the state's position. Mr. Mitchell has a constitutional right to file these briefs. And not only did he have one illegal sentence, he had two. So the state's position is an error. Not just that, this is the most incredible transformation story that I've ever seen or read. And who would have known 18 years prior to this that this would happen? And he said it would be a travesty for him not to move and reduce my sentence. And the chief of security from the prison had written a letter on my behalf, and that was something that put it over the top, because he talked about what I had done in the prison. And it's not a me thing, because it wasn't just me, it was me and many guys like me, Antoine Savija right there, all the brothers. There's so many of us behind the walls. And some of us might be Bloods or Crips. But guess what? That's something that somebody took on as a young kid, and they don't want to stay there. Again, we all change. Nobody's who they were 20 years ago. If you are, I feel bad for you.
I know we have time, but can I get one moment?
We hear maybe from our senator, the delegate first, and then.
I'm an educator by degree. So that means I have spent most of my career working in schools. And I spent most of that time in schools that folks call tough. And in the last one where I was principal, we had gangs. We made agreements about how we were going to handle ourselves in that building because it was going to be their safe space. But I always had to keep on my desk the phone number for an attorney, because I knew at any given time one of them would need it. I came to this, and I'll point out the Vincents who sit back there, who work with those who've been incarcerated. I came to this, and thank you, Senator, because she's the one who put my name out there, knowing my heart, that one of the gang members in my school, who, as you've all said, was a person underneath it all with heart, and didn't want to do it, but it was about survival, and it was also about having parents who said, you need to go out there and do this because these are my needs, because they were off. And I could look at them and realize that every single day that I wake, including today, before I get out that bed, I say, thank you, God, because I know I am such a flawed person, and that every single day my eyes open, I know I have been forgiven. So you can't thank God for forgiveness and not forgive yourselves and other people. That's a reality. So when I saw this young man arrested and given 88 years for a nonviolent crime, and we all went, several of us went to court to testify for him because he stayed at my side. And the judge said, I don't care. I'm gonna make him an example. The fight was on there. So ultimately, of course, it was reduced. He did 18 years. He's recently out, is raising 4 boys by himself to make sure that they do not get engaged and involved in any of the things that he was. And this coming week, another one of my students who's been in for 15 years, who, as scary as it was, came to me to confess, and I had to tell him, stop, I need you to stop, I'm gonna get you an attorney right now for murder, for killing his best friend. Something he laments every single day of his life because he got caught up in gang activity, and he knew he wasn't that person. But again, he thought he needed to do something to survive and to look tough in trying to survive. And he hurts every single day. But next week, we'll step up and give it our very best shot for him and all of the rest who are out there who for one reason or another don't get a shot. And when I looked at that film and I heard people talking about their world as teenagers, as young people, and I know, and I look at another delegate in the room and say, I know that people really get sick of me and turned off to me when we're sitting in those judiciary hearings, listening to people talk about what the sentence ought to look like. What about saving the children before we have to talk about the sentence? But we are not doing that because it's easier and fiscally sound to talk about how we incarcerate than it is to admit, one, that as adults we have failed young people. We have pulled away programs and opportunities from them, and we have failed them by giving up, relinquishing our role, and I'll say grown-ups, adults by age, grown-ups by life experiences. We have relinquished that to them. And now we want to make them predators. We want to punish them because we didn't do our jobs. I won't give up on this because if we give up on our young people and those who have changed in prison or wherever they happen to be, those who didn't get caught, if we give up on them, we give up on society, period. And I'm gonna say it for every African American that's sitting in this room, because I might well be one of the oldest ones sitting in the room. I'm going to say, it gets on my nerves when we say, and they look like us. They've been looking like us for a long time. And what have we done? They've been looking like this for a long time. And we have relinquished our responsibility or turned it over to someone else to make that difference. I'm having, for some of you who I'm having a family Hamer moment. That's right. I've had my career, so I'm sitting in Annapolis, and I'm sure the salary I make is being eaten up, okay, in other ways. Okay, so it's not about that. But I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of looking at children struggling and wanting to be better. And my last thing to say is, if in my school, those children who were in gangs wanted to wake up on any given morning and say, and I can go to school and give drama, give fever, give this, give that, or I'm not going to school, they could have done that. But they chose to come together, knowing no tagging, no flags, no colors, we don't do that. They chose to be able to come someplace and exhale. That's called a second chance.
Mm-hmm.
These stories are really moving, and so I just want to thank everybody that's already shared your story, because I think that, first of all, there's and to some extent, there's nothing left to say, but actually, there's still a whole heck of a lot to say. I'm Senator Jill Carter, and I'll try to briefly answer the question, but also bring up what I think is critically important for us to discuss today. So, I was born into a civil rights leader's family, and he died abruptly when I was a little girl. And when my dad had been out in the streets and the community, working and fighting for our people, when I would ask my mother, "Where's Dad?" she would say, he is out working for the liberation of our people. And so as a little girl, I understood something very fundamentally, that the liberation and freedom of Black people was, one, the most important thing to my father, but because he was my hero, it became the absolute most important thing to me, and it needs to be the most important thing to everybody in this room. Because until we have that, we will constantly find ourselves on the bottom rung. And in situations like we're in Maryland, which is the state that incarcerates the most Black people, percentage-wise, in the country. So that being said, my father died abruptly, and the older I get, I realize how God guides your steps. So, I learned about the business of growing up, and as fate would have it, when I went to law school and came out to do clerkship, I clerked for a man, a judge, some of y'all might have heard him, and it might not have been great, Judge Kenneth LaVon Johnson. But as fate would have it, the year I went to clerk for Kenneth LaVon Johnson, he convened a grand jury, and the task of the grand jury, the charge of the grand jury, was to examine why, of all of the felony convictions or felony cases in the felony arraignment court, why the majority, I don't remember the numbers anymore, but huge numbers, thousands, cases by the thousands, this was, the 90s. Nobody that came before the court had an education of above the 10th grade. For the most part, that was the average. And most of the people that were selling drugs were selling and had some type of addiction, so in some respects, selling to support a habit. And there was no effort to ever go above that, to look at how the influx of drugs, the white collar criminals, the wholesalers, the importers, the traffickers, the real ones. And so it resonated with me that the entire criminal justice system is designed to ignore crime at high levels and actually target low-level poor people, mainly Black people if you're in Baltimore City and Maryland. So that being said, I would say that trying to right these wrongs between the mission that I felt my whole life with my father, and then, you know, the information I got very early in my career as a lawyer. And then I went to work for the public defender, and then ever since then, I've been a criminal defense lawyer. It's interesting because when I first got to the House of Delegates all the way back in 2003, I was the third ever Black woman attorney in the House of Delegates, and now I'm the only Black woman attorney in the Senate of Maryland. So it's been my experiences as a lawyer also where I've seen just, you know, savage and massive injustice. Delegate Pastor talked about, you know, really essentially, we blame the victim. We create the situation and then we blame the recipient of our policies. And one of those major policies and why our children have been so ignored and mistreated for so long has been that Maryland is still, Maryland and Baltimore City in particular, are still the capital of lead poisoning of children in the country. You know that, right? And so, you know, lead poison is a #1 precursor to any type of juvenile delinquency or criminality because it destroys the ability of people to control their impulses. And add to that other factors like inadequate education, add to that factors like broken communities, add to that factors of no real economic engine in the neighborhoods, and you come up with what we have now in Baltimore City, what we've had for a long time. So all of that to be said, what is important is everybody's individual story is moving. Every time I hear a story or see one personally because of my law practice, you know, I'm touched by it. But what is driving me, in addition to the individual stories, is I want Black people to win. I want us to finally win. I want us to realize that promise that I felt that we had when I was a child in the 60s.
And for myself, before I had the opportunity to have the illegal sentence filed, this Second Look Act was the biggest thing talked about in the prison. I mean, when you say things going viral, when that newspaper came through, that bill number went viral, and the poor librarian in every prison in Maryland got swamped at requests for that bill. And I just encourage you to know what hope looks like in prison. Is people they're dependent on us. And I just encourage you to know that when this comes out in the newspaper and it says Second Look Act, that's going to be the new talk in the prison. And please support it and teach people how to support it. Because one thing we did know in prison, because everything's electronic, it was very hard to support things from the inside out. So I'd just like to make that known to you.
While we're waiting for the bill, what Senator Carter said about the voting, especially for formerly incarcerated people, people who have been out, we are becoming a very large block of people. Returning citizens like myself and many of you out there. We must, not next year, not next month, but this month, the next couple of days, the next week, begin to form voting registration coalitions. We must go out and get our people registered to vote. In order for these bills to pass, as she says, as Senator Carter says, they have to know that we have their back. They have to know that they're standing up for what we really want. And we really want to give our families a second chance. And how we do it? Go out, let's make it known. If you don't vote for what we want you to vote for, we won't vote for you next year. We got to use the leverage that we have. And we do have leverage. Returning citizens have the right to vote in Maryland. A lot of I found out at the last election, a lot of them didn't know that. A lot of them didn't realize that they do. So now what we do is we go into community associations. We go to meetings and we set up tables and we register people to vote. I've become a voting registrar. Some of my friends have. And we've joined organizations that are going around the city and making sure. We have an organization that goes down to Lexington Market and Northeast Market. We're going to make sure next week Not only are they be talking about reentry, they're gonna be talking about voter registration. We can all play our part in that. It means a lot. That's the only way these bills are gonna get passed, is that we make our voices known through voting.
Sorry, one quick thing. This, just by way of education, we used to be able to have modification of sentence, and some of you talked about filing multiple petitions. But I remember the debate, because I was brand new delegate when it happened, and the change. You used to be able to file a modification of sentence anytime, but it was limited to only you could file it in 90 days, within 90 days, and then you got 5 years to execute your opportunity to have a hearing, and after that is over. And you used to be able to do it any time, but what happened was the judges were all down there complaining about how they had to deal with all these petitions, multiple months they weren't going to grant, and then, you know, just the massive paperwork and the obligation of did they have to really answer them all. And so it was something that they wanted, is to not have to deal with it, because they had to deal with the modification, they had to deal with multiple post-conviction filings, and then they had to deal with the habeas filings, and it was just really it was annoying to them. That's really what it was. And but I think what's most important is why this is important is post-conviction, you got to prove incompetent counsel. Some of the other ones, writ of actual innocence, habeas, you got to have a constitutional violation. This is the only avenue for someone that simply deserves a second chance. So that's why this is so important.
Yes.
Did we get an answer to our bill number? And if not,
The Senate bill.
just look at this, if you look at the Senate bill,
The Senate bill is
1, 2, 3,
123, and
it'll link it, right?
within like the next week, when you pull that up, the House bill will pop up too. We're still early in session and not all the bill numbers are showing up in the system. But I think that whoever is sharing, everybody in here needs to know how to pull up the Maryland General Assembly website. You need to also register on the top of it for either My MDA or YouTube, so you can sign up to testify, and so you can watch our hearings. And I promise you, some of it could be boring, but judicial proceedings and House Judiciary, we are never dull.
Let me ditto that, we are never done. And we go late into the night. But if you didn't get all of that, I can send it to you. Brooke, hold your hand up, please. All right, that's my constituent liaison, and she will give you either my card, her card, or my chief of staff's card, and just call us or send us an email, and we'll send you everything that you need to know to do anything you want to do. Okay, bill number, how to testify, and walk you through how to get on, so you can see Brooke. That we do have.
I also, the Senate hearing for Al, Second Rule Coalition bill is gonna be Thursday, February 1st at 1 p.m. in the Senate building. That's the hearing where they will listen to any of us who would like to go down and testify, who would like to speak in favor of the bill, but you can believe there are gonna be people down there who are speaking, who are opposed.
It'll be the Maryland State Attorneys Association and some of the law enforcement agencies and chiefs and sheriffs. Okay? That's all basically the case.
So you can sign up and register to support this bill.
But he's one of many state's attorneys, but he represents oftentimes the entire coalition of state's attorneys across the state. So pretty much you can count on all the time. MSAA, all the state's attorneys, and oftentimes law enforcement officials, chiefs and sheriffs, and FOP. Which you would think, why does the FOP really care? Like, they already did their part when they put the rest of it, right? Their job is done.
Funding. Funding. It's always the money.
Let me say this. I think it is important that we all get involved in this process. Like I said, I've only been home 3 years. And me and two brothers I worked with last night, all returned citizens. And I talked about, since I've been home, how I've dedicated and committed these first 3 years for this struggle. And man, I've lost some things, I've sacrificed a lot of things, man, all for this cause. I've been home 3 years, man, I ain't even got a woman in my life. I'm not in a relationship. I don't have children. So man, I dedicated this session right here, I'm gonna do it, but also, man, I wanna have a family. So I'm asking everybody, man, it don't take, one person don't have to do a lot if all of us just do a little bit. If all of us just do a little bit, some of us can get a little bit more comfort, man, and we can accomplish the mission that need to be accomplished. Man, just go in your community, talk to who you can talk to people where you are and where you at. And I'm gonna tell you how surprising this is. I work for a local county government agency. I do peer recovery support for men and women who come out, for veterans, for transition age youth. And all my clients, they always say, Mr. Turner, baby, you don't know how hard it is to come home and do this. I get to laugh. I say, man, you don't know what I know. They say you don't. So I had to tell them my story. And now all of a sudden, yeah, you know what it is. Because I went in at 17 and done 31 and a half. And I tell them that little 2-3 years you've done, that little couple of months you've done, it's nothing compared to what I've done. And I tell them, all you got to do is follow the blueprint. All the friends you left behind, you can show them how to get out here and stay out here, man. We have to come together as a community, man. And everybody, they talk about this thing with the juveniles, and let me tell you something. It costs $150,000 a year to hold a juvenile inside of juvenile detention. That's not what I say. That's what the Department of Juvenile Justice Service say. $150,000. We have taken out all the trades of high school: plumbing and heating, air conditioning, cosmetology, nursing, secretarial skills, auto mechanic, welding, all the trades that made America prosperous and able to do things. We have taken them out of high school. If you want to know if a juvenile is in trouble or will get in trouble or leading down the wrong path, look at their attendance in school. Elementary school, middle school, and high school. When you have seen a child within the first quarter miss 30 days or more, why social services not doing the call? Let's find out what's going on at home, why this child is not coming to school. And then when we find out what's going on, it's time for the state, it's time for the county, it's time for the city to put the resources to work in that house. Why? So that child shouldn't go through that prison process.
Can please applaud that, because that's
See, you gotta be willing to stop where it's starting at, so it won't go where other people want to see it go at.
Yes.
We got to be willing to invest the funds in our children now before they go inside of a prison, before they spend $150,000 in the Department of Juvenile Justice Service. If we got to be real with the issue, man. Some people who are in our own community want to see us go to jail, man, because they get their pockets lined by those who run the prison system. Everybody want to know why cell phones in prison? Because it costs $4.99 for the first minute and 99 cents for every other minute. And I can get a cell phone that they only pay $50 a month. And if my mother, 80 years old, I need to talk to her. Let's be real, man. Prisons exist because it's a $1 billion corporation, man. And some people got their hand inside of the crocodile mouth. But as a people, man, a community, all we got to do is come together, man, and push a little bit harder, man. Every person just got to do a little bit, so when one person has to do a lot.
Yo, I'm gonna let you ask a question, and then they're gonna kick me in.
I just wanted to say, everybody's story is incredible. Every one of us has our own story, you know. I want to thank Senator Carter. She's been a guest on my show. I'm from the Eastern Shore. I partnered with I have a radio show. I partnered with the radio station out there, To the Good Brother, you talking about prevention and diversion. Through the radio station and the radio show, we've had like kids from different AAU programs come on the show. And I noticed, I said, man, they love, obviously the kids love music and they love, you know, the touching the board and the microphone and all that. I said, you know what, I was talking to my partner, I said, we ought to do something with this and create a program for these kids. To your point, a lot of things they've taken out of school, the community centers, the rec centers, they don't have places to create and use art and creativity. So I said, well, let's use this radio station. Let's do it like that. So that's what we did. So we created a program for the youth. We have the kids come by. They create commercials. We teach them how to do podcasts, DJing. We have a DJ come in. They have a DJ set, girls and guys. And with that, I said, that's great. But when they leave here, they go back to where they came from. I said, let's follow these kids throughout the school year, have an incentive set up for them where if they have a certain GPA, we can give them gift cards, tickets to Ravens games, tickets to Orioles games, and we've done that. And these kids, we've watched these kids, and they come back and say, little Johnny went from a D average, C average to A's. To your point, they're interested in school because they know I have to have an education in order to go to college, or to go to a trade, or I have to learn I have to know to read and write, public speaking. There's so many different things, so many skills that they learn within our program that's helped these kids. But then I thought about on the legislation side with this here. I just had a cousin. He was sentenced to 127 years on shore. He got out in October due to a loophole in this case. So he did 12 out of the 127. But because of what he went through, and I saw the loophole and just the system itself, and when Ms. Carter came on our show, I'm like, I gotta back this, I gotta get behind this. So what we did, we went beyond the walls of the radio station and created teams, campaign teams at Salisbury University, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Warwick Tech, to push this. So any literature you guys may have, I know I'm old school, so I'm about the street team, getting out there with the people, talking to the people. I know the internet is great, but we gotta get beyond that, hit the streets like the brother said. So I'm utilizing my platform along with our team to push this and do whatever we can. But again, it starts early. It's about prevention, getting before they get behind those walls.
Thank you so much.
If you can get the Eastern Shore legislators that represent y'all to support this, I will accept any challenge of anybody in this room to do anything.
That's a challenge right there.
Other than not being political.
Yeah, excuse me, not that. If you can get the Eastern Shore legislators using those wealthy people down there and building a coalition down there, I would love to follow that process, okay? Because that, traditionally, they would never support this.
You're right.
And may I add, as you talk about what you're doing with them while they're in school, we need to talk about while they're still in school. I call it the second system, before they're in the second system, but also when they are reentering. Because we laughed at some of the things that we saw in the video because the folks had been in so long, things had changed. But just like we have to take care of our children so they don't get in that second system, when they've been in for a long time and coming out, things change so quickly. And so what we do to advocate and support those who are re-entering is just as important, because we find that having a jump, it's just like having something written across your face because you have to sign off on it every time you do an application or whatever. So we still aren't really forgiven. And even if you get hired, let someone else come along who can do the same thing, but don't have to fill out that space. And I'm saying that based on that young man that is out now that I know. A beautiful resume, right? your eye on this. And I'm gonna say the eye on the prize because it's our people. So what we do before they go in the second system and what we do to support them when they come out is critical. Don't just rejoice because folks are out. Rejoice because we're going to make them feel like they are a integral and viable part of the system.
Let's say this, I know we passed ban box. Let me say this. I don't go to Royal Farms for nothing, except use the bathroom. Even though in Maryland say you are not allowed to ask about the criminal conviction of a person or if they've been convicted of a felony, when I first got out, I applied for a job at Royal Farms in Brandywine. They paying $16 an hour. I filled out an application. They took the application, gave it to a second party. They ran a criminal background check. I didn't even get the interview. They had the audacity to send me the email and say, this is why we are not giving you an interview and you cannot be applied. You're a convicted murderer. And they list the court file. So ban the box is on the books, but companies are not abiding by it. Why? Because they're not doing it. I just paid this person to do it. I gave them your application with your social security number, your date of birth, and your address on it. And they ran a criminal background check. And for some of y'all who don't know law, once I hire you, you are my employee. So technically, I violated the law. But guess what? I wrote the Department of Labor license in Baltimore to file a complaint. They said it wasn't nothing they could do.
No truth in the law.
The law is supposed to be action, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
But it's not action.
But no, it's on, a
It's
lawyer
written.
could do it, you know what I'm saying, if they, but the civil rights office is supposed to do it.
But it's just some things we gotta work on.
Regulations, we're supposed to do it.
Because in all reality, when we do get a second chance, we gotta fight hard to get a job or even a place to live for a second chance.
Especially housing.
In Maryland, if you look for an apartment,
Definitely.
you know what happens when you pay that lower down payment and the application fee? You don't get that back because they turn it down for being a convicted felon.
Yeah, housing is really.
I want to
But
thank
back to second chance.
all my panelists for making us think not just about how do we get second chances, but how are we preventing, right, kids from getting incarcerated in the first place, and how are we supporting people once they come home. If you all signed in on the sign-in sheet, and I have your contact information, we send you email blasts for our lobbying day, for testifying, and we're gonna connect as well. If you want to join our coalition meetings, we meet every other Wednesday at 5 o'clock on Zoom. Feel free to connect with me after this if you want to get even more involved and dedicate every other week to meeting with us. But thank you so much to the Enoch Pratt Library for letting us use the space. Yes, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
In the event that you believe in God and you're just sitting here listening to this, so let me tell you how God works. So he says, so what school was that? And I tell him, he names the last young man about whom I was speaking, cellmates. Wow. What
man, let's not forget the women who are behind these bars, behind the walls and the bars, and in the only one prison that the state of Maryland has. So, man, if you have a woman, you know a woman that's incarcerated in prison, man, just send her a letter and let her know you appreciate her and you think about her.
Thank you again to all my speakers. Thank you so much for dedicating not just your Saturday, but many years to this work. Thank you, and thank you everyone for attending, braving the snow.